So, Bugonia is the latest film from Yorgos Lanthimos, with a script by Will Tracy, who's written stuff like The Regime and Menu and has worked on Succession. So Will specializes in kind of like Eat the Rich type of satires, but and sometimes they're actually pretty good. But I feel like his type of satire, it only kind of comes in one type of flavor, and I don't think it's as well suited for like a Yorgos Lanthimos film, especially for a film that's based on a Korean film called Save the Green Planet, which its premise is about some people kidnapping somebody who they believe is an alien and trying to destroy the planet, and it's very much like a paranoid thriller, and it eventually arrives at a conclusion that's a little bit of a twist, but not much of one. And I think that's kind of like the biggest problem with Bugonia, is that it feels like a remake that is trying to stick too close to the source material, because it feels like the entire absurdity of this film is all centered around answering a very binary question of whether or not this character of Michelle Fuller, this pharmaceutical CEO played by Emma Stone, is an alien. Because there are two people who believe that she is an alien, and that's Teddy Gatz, played by Jesse Plemons, and his cousin called Don, played by Iden Delbus. And so they've both basically fallen down this conspiracy hole where, life has just gotten tough for them. Teddy's mother has grown sick due to, products from like this pharmaceutical company. Teddy comes to this realization that, oh, Michelle must be an alien. So what we're going to do is we're going to kidnap her, and we're going to try to find a way to make contact with her alien mothership. Now, the entire absurdity of this premise, it's just like, it feels like it's only going one of two paths. Either Fuller is an alien or she isn't. And without giving away too much of the premise here, it does actually answer that binary question, and which is a little bit of a letdown, because I'm usually used to Lanthimos' films like going into wilder and weirder places than what they first set out to be, and I feel like we kind of got a little bit spoiled on that with films like Kinds of Kindness, which was a bit of an anthology film that went in all kinds of odd directions. And then we, before that, of course, we had Poor Things, which, took like the Frankenstein story and directed it into, critiques of capitalism and feminism and embracing sexuality and criticizing every aspect of society. It went into some fun places there. And it feels like Bugonia is kind of really only going down one rigid route. And it feels like there are other aspects to consider with how much weirder it could get. Like, there are some actually pretty nice conversations between Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons, where, they're kind of trying to meet each other on the same level. And they talk very, very, very straight-faced in this kind of like idiosyncratic language that, it's very much on brand for them. Given the work that they previously did in Kinds of Kindness, it's something that you would expect from a Lanthimos film. But also, I would expect like a little something more from that. And it always feels like when the conversations happen between these two characters, because Emma Stone is being held captive, and Jesse Plemons is a very dangerous, outsider, and the way that they try to connect, it feels like the conversation is always leading towards something more interesting, like Michelle addressing a little bit more of Teddy's ailing mother, or trying to connect with Don, because Don's like a little bit slow-witted and just kind of goes with the flow with Teddy. It feels like there is something more to explore with these characters in several of these dialogue passages, not just like philosophically, just, in terms of like building up their characters. And it never felt like the film was building any momentum. It always felt like it was stopping any weirdness that could be explored and just getting back to the central point of, whether or not Michelle Fuller is an alien and how can they prove it. And it feels, and like Teddy keeps trying to like keep this laser focus. Like, that's part of his character. Like, he is trying to stay focused on the central topic here of whether or not this CEO is an alien and how to make contact with the other aliens. And it feels like when the film is just sticking to that route, I feel like it's going to be more serviceable. It's more serviceable for, you know, a general audience because, you know, it doesn't jump around all that much. It generally stays on one path of just, you know, this alien conspiracy, and rarely does it veer off from that, which is kind of sad because there are some interesting routes that it can take here. I mean, you have Alicia Silverstone as Teddy's mother, which is kind of an interesting role because the only speaking lines she has in the film is kind of these inspiring words of a conspiracy that I felt like could have been explored a little bit more, but we don't get much of her. We also don't get too much of this local police officer called Casey, played by Stavros Halkis. I think he's a comedian actor who he has a very rocky history with Teddy, which leads into like a little bit of pedophilia, and it feels like there is something more to explore that character, but again, it keeps cutting off because it feels like this film just it's got to stay on that road. It's got to stay firmly directed on this alien conspiracy and not veer too much else too off to the side, and you know, addressing all the capitalist structures that led Teddy to this point, or how Michelle's life of just, you know, optimum health kind of conflicts with Teddy's, or how Don is so easily led into this conspiracy, or how Teddy's become so accepting of it because he's embraced this sort of like nihilistic mindset. There's so much potential with this story, and it never felt like it was building on much of that. And I think a big problem with this film is that it tries to like find this balance of satire where you're meant to both despise Michelle Fuller because, you know, she's a rich person, she's poisoned people and she can afford to do it, and she could easily manipulate Teddy into letting her go or convincing others that she's an alien, so you don't really like her as much. But also, you don't really like Teddy because he's also you know, he's very violent, he's very manipulative, he has aggression problems, he has a very damaged lifestyle, and he has these very absurd ideas when he keeps mentioning, you know, the specifics of how aliens, you know, they make contact with their hair, so we had to shave off all of Emma Stone's hair, or how their mothership works, or how do you make contact, or how the teleporters work, and you're just kind of supposed to like laugh at him and also laugh at her. And ultimately, I think the film kind of wants to end on like this doomorous point about how, you know, how these two are just like, they're so destructive and they're so idiotic that you have to like laugh at both of them and feel like they both deserve a destruction to their lives, which kind of arrives. And it's just, there's something so empty about that as well, especially for how rigid it leads towards that path of just highlighting how, you know, there's that disconnect between communication and how we're supposed to laugh at both, you know, like the rich CEO gets kidnapped and the conspiratorial nut who just easily accepts this wild route that he's chosen to take. And there's this very discomforting level where just like you don't really feel like laughing at it all that much. It has this very hollow nature to the satire where you're not quite sure who to root for besides just like the general destruction of Earth, which happened at the original Save the Green Planet, the South Korean film that it's based on. And it becomes like such like a straight adaptation that it made me, it left me hungry for like a better Lanthimos film. Like, don't get me wrong, like Plemons is great in this, Stone is great in this, but they've always been pretty good in like these Lanthimos type of films that I expected more. I expected more from Lanthimos. I expected more from the writing here. I guess maybe I shouldn't have expected much from Will Tracy. I mean, this feels like the type of Eat the Rich type of film that he would delve in. So I guess I can't be too disappointed on that front. But I think a lot of what I love about Lanthimos is just how it relies on the unexpected or veering more into the grotesque. And it felt like, I think especially from like the soundtrack here, it felt like this film was trying to be a little bit more operatic and theatrical with what it was trying to do with the material here. It felt like it wasn't weird enough. And I'm sure for some people it will be pretty weird because it does go into some odd places. It takes some violent turns, like it has an obsession with bees. The alien ideas are very weird and strange, and you're meant to laugh at it. And I did kind of chuckle a little bit here and there, but I kept waiting for it to take off. I kept waiting for it to get wilder, get weirder, go into more strange and grotesque and violent places, and just take me somewhere that the original Save the Green Planet didn't take me to. And it really didn't. It just kind of felt like it stayed firmly in its lane of being a little bit weird, but not weird enough. So yeah, Bugonia was a bit of a letdown. Like, it's an okay dark comedy. If you go in knowing like the general premise, and if you don't expect anything more than that, it's okay. But I kept hoping for something more. So considering, Yorgos Lanthimos' previous films of Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness, Bugonia was a little bit of a letdown. It wasn't like a terrible film. It was just, considering the director, it was a very, very underwhelming dark comedy.